Hi, everyone. Welcome. We're going to wait just a couple, maybe a minute or so for people to get logged in and get situated. How are you, Stephen?
Good, Laura. How are you?
Doing well on the East Coast. How are you in LA?
It's very rainy.
Okay.
Very, very rainy.
Well, I think I can say in New York that the weather is much better today. We may hit 60.
Can you tell how it's raining out the window? I don't know how good my camera is.
I can't tell. It looks cloudy though. That I can tell.
Yeah.
All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, How to Lead a Lean Legal Team and Simplify Your High Volume Contracts. Before we get started, just doing a quick overview of what we'll be covering in today's discussion. We'll learn about Stephen's career and how he got to running both the legal and HR team at InStride, how he thinks about making a meaningful impact across the business. And then we'll dive into how InStride implemented Ironclad CLM and Clickwrap to enable their legal team to intake, organize, and analyze a large volume of contracts so that they could provide life-changing educational opportunities. If you don't know already, I'm Laura Garcia. I'm Senior Counsel at Ironclad, and I'll be your moderator. Just a little bit about me. This is all about Stephen, but I'll give you a little bit of background about me. I started in a non-traditional path in my career. I started in-house at a large multinational insurance company where I did a rotational program. And I was very lucky that they also had a very robust pro bono program, which allowed me to take on divorce cases and small business clinics and eventually immigration cases. And through that, I found an opportunity with the U.S. Senator's office and did some work in the immigration field. I then, moved back in-house to a large professional services firm and a small insurtech where they happened to use Ironclad. And my eyes were just opened. It was completely life-changing for me. I actually attended or viewed via online the State of Digital Contracting, and I love the product. So excited to be here. And yeah, I'm excited to be joined by Stephen. So I'll let him introduce himself.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steven. If anyone knows me or gets to know Laura better, I think Laura is far more interesting than I could ever be, as she mentioned earlier. But I think, Laura, thank you so much for allowing me to be here with you today. Thank you, Ironclad. So I'm Steven. I run legal and HR at InStride. InStride is a company that offers education opportunities through like a curated network of academic partners and institutions and universities. We put that menu of options together and go to enterprise Fortune 500 companies and say, hey, why don't you offer as a benefit to your employees, kind of like your 401k? Why don't you offer, life-changing education opportunities to your employees and you pay for it, employer? And so we'll kind of match up these academic programs with their employees, which we then call learners when they enroll. And we kind of give them those opportunities. I think my goal today, Laura, before I hand it back to you, I have two objectives. One is to keep this super fun and exciting, which I think I told you last week when we were preparing for this. So it's my goal to keep everyone completely on us and not multitasking at the same time. And the second one is to try to not get fired for my day job from anything that I say. And I told you last week, Laura, that I love Ironclad so much that like if I get fired because of this webinar, it's my first webinar, guys, then Ironclad has to give me a job at the end of this.
Well, that's a hard bargain. I don't know if I could do that, but we'll figure something out. Hopefully you don't get fired, because I feel, and I just really want to stress to anybody, everyone listening, that InStride is doing really life-changing work. When I first chatted with Stephen and got to know him and what the company is doing, it really is life-changing. People come from different non-traditional paths. They're in the workforce. These are frontline workers that are getting the opportunity to support their families, and then at the same time get the education and the opportunities that they need. So I'm really excited to chat with you all about how InStride is using Clickwrap and Ironclad. But let's get to know Stephen first a little bit more. Let's understand a little bit about, how you got to InStride. How did you transition in-house?
Yeah, so I started off after law school working at a couple of really large law firms, one in New York, one in LA, doing general corporate work. And I think throughout the session, I'll try to sprinkle in my like little Stephen Chew tidbits of advice along the way. And my first one is that you really have to be a nice person. I think it's so important as a lawyer throughout your career to just be really, really kind and nice, no matter who you're working with, because it kind of tells the story of how I moved from the law firm to in-house. When I was basically like a fifth year at Gibson Dunn in LA, I was working on the debt piece of a corporate transaction, and another corporate associate who's a year ahead of me was working on the equity piece of the transaction, and it was kind of complicated. It was pretty complex, and the partners allowed me and this other associate to do a lot of the work, and we got to know each other, pretty well during this transaction, and it was pretty tough. And he, like pretty much a week or two after the transaction closed, this other associate ended up leaving to go in-house at CBRE, which is a large commercial real estate services firm based in LA. And he goes in-house. And a year goes by, and he's at CBRE. And apparently the deputy general counsel of corporate at CBRE asks him, like, hey, do you know anyone that might be interested in going in-house? Do you know anyone at Gibson that you really liked? And me and this associate, other than this one transaction, we did not know each other at all, like at all. We just worked on this thing, one time. It was like a 2 or 3 month deal, and got along well though. And he said, and a year goes by, and he said, "Hey, you got to meet this guy named Stephen Chew. I think he could be really great." So he then introduces me to this guy named Stephen Ballas. Stephen's now a corporate partner at Sidley Austin here in LA. But at the time, Stephen was the deputy general counsel at CBRE, and he and I get to know each other. And he's like, "Hey, there's a position opening up. I'd like you to interview for it." I interview for it, and then I joined CBRE, and Stephen actually becomes my mentor. So I worked with Stephen for 2 years, and then he became general counsel at another large public company in LA. I become his deputy general counsel, and then continued to learn under him for 3 or 4 years. And then when I decided I wanted to, go on my own and become general counsel, I ended up joining a small startup called Swift at the time. I was lawyer number one. I was the only lawyer. I was employee number 125. By the time I left Swift, we were like at 600 or 700 employees. My legal department was about 9 people at the time. And then I moved over from Swift to InStride, basically through a headhunter. A headhunter called me and said, "Hey, do you want to move over?" And I really liked the mission. Swift had a great mission too of getting more people more active more often. But InStride's got as you kind of mentioned, Laura, a really great mission too, and that's what brought me over.
Oh, no, that's definitely be kind, be respectful. I think in our profession, you never know, what's happening down the line, what commercial deal you're going to enter into, what just who you're going to reach out to and run into. So that's definitely words to live by. What has been your biggest challenge since you have been in-house, either at Swift or at InStride?
Yeah, so I think the biggest challenge, and I think if there's a lot of in-house lawyers on, I think a lot of this will resonate with you, is when you're at the law firm, you have like 2 meetings with clients, maybe 2 meetings with a partner per day. Like that's all you have. Like most of your day, you get to think, sit in front of your computer, do work. When you go in-house, I remember when I first took that job, like you're in meetings all day long, like all day. Like it's basically you get to work at 9 and you're like on calls, you're in meetings, you're pretty much throughout the entire day. And like when I first got there, I was like, when do I have time to do like actual work? Is most of my work just like in meetings, listening to people tell me what to do, and then like at some point I'll figure out how to do it. That was the biggest challenge for me, was kind of like going from this place where I could like think, do work, and then like go into this environment where I'm like, okay, you really should be doing work on like 100 different things and spend like 10 minutes on each one. And that was like a big transition, a transition that I think I like now. But at the time, it took some getting used to, because I think lawyers really like to like dig deep, think hard, get to the right solution. And now someone was like, "Okay, Stephen, get to the right solution in like 15 minutes and move on to the next one." So that was the biggest challenge for me.
Yeah, Stephen, get to those Slacks quickly. Like, you should be multitasking right now on this webinar and answering
Yeah.
Slacks. um, so I know you're a forward-thinking legal leader. I look up to you. Your team looks up to you. What exactly does that mean?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think there's two or three things that I think you can do to become what I think is a forward-thinking legal leader. The first one is to, and this is like, sprinkle advice number two, is really got to know your product. And I think a lot of GCs think that it's I'm just going to be a really great lawyer. I'm going to know how to do work with the board. I'm going to know how to do all the commercial transactions. I'm going to know how to not get sued. And I think that's become a little bit of table stakes for GCs. I think that the more important thing is you got to know, and this is kind of the rule of thumb that I have for most GCs that I talk to, you got to know your product and what you're selling better than the CEO. Like that's how you become a GC that's going to be looked to for their advice on really difficult situations. Because when it comes time to talking about the business and you're in your executive level meeting, and you're talking about, or a board level meeting, and you're talking about what's the future direction of our business, how are we going to scale revenue, how are we going to create better margins, whatever that question is. Like if you don't know what you're selling or how you sell it, and you just know, well, I do the contracts, like that's not going to be enough to make a compelling case in that meeting, or to show that you're a legal leader that knows more than just the legal stuff, that you actually know how to drive the business forward. And so knowing your product is kind of like, I think, lesson number one. I think number two is that you've got to stay on top of the latest trends. And I think there's kind of two parts to that. One is like when I first became a lawyer under Steven, one of the things that he did was he subscribed to like 100 law firm alerts. Like he was getting, like, I would look at his email inbox, and like half of his emails from like Sidley Austin, Gibson Dunn, Latham, Cooley, and it was just like a ton of law firms were just like sending, and he would send him all this stuff, and he would like read it, and he would like, and again, the annoying part is he would forward it to me and be like, Steven, you need to do this. But like that's how he stayed on top of like being a great lawyer, is like he like opened himself up to like making sure that he was aware that someone out there is already doing the work for us. Like someone way smarter than me for sure is like investigating the latest development in law, reviewing the latest Supreme Court case. There's someone out there doing it, and they're willing to share that information for free. And if you just like go subscribe to it and make sure that it hits your inbox, and you spend 5 minutes, either reading the title or reading the article itself, like you're going to be such a better lawyer because of it, because you kind of know what's impacting all lawyers kind of globally. And the last one I think is staying on top of like the latest technology. And that, I think, Ironclad is obviously a part of that, but it's like making sure that you know all of the potential legal tools that are out there. And I use this example because it's just easy. Is like if you think that if you get an NDA and you print it out and you get a red pen, and you mark it up and then scan it and then send it to the other side, like if you think that's like the newest technology, a way to like mark up a document, like I hope that's pretty antiquated. But that wasn't, that was the way we did things like 10 years ago. It wasn't like that long ago. And I think you have to like make sure that you're staying, because by the way, that's a super antiquated method. And if you're still doing that, I apologize for insulting you, but like, I don't think you should do that anymore. But I think that you should therefore, look at all of the potential legal tools and technology that are out there to make your life better and easier. Because when you talk to other lawyers, especially GCs that are 28 years old these days, they're going to know all the latest trends, the latest technology to make their life better. And you don't want to be the person that's still scanning your red lines.
Yeah, I mean, to your first point, know your product. I hear you, but our CEO Jason also happens to be a lawyer. It's just it's a hard. I'm gonna try and
we're different businesses.
Yeah, no, I know it well, but I will say I think I don't know if I could beat Jason at that one. I will try my hardest, and work in progress, I will say. So you're chief legal officer, but you also run the HR function. What is that like? How do you balance leading both legal and HR?
Yeah, it was definitely a unique situation because before I got to InStride, there were actually two predecessors. So actually, there was a GC and there was a chief human resources officer, and they ended up combining it, which is, I think, a unique occurrence in private equity-backed companies. But when I decided to take it on, it was something that I had experience with before, because at Zwift, my prior company, our chief people officer had left somewhat abruptly. And I think GCs having that really, really close relationship with HR, which again comes back to that point around, hey, know your entire business, be a nice person. And I think you're kind of like, as lawyers, we get tapped to do these kind of things outside of our normal scope. And so the CEO asked me, hey, Steven, you should run HR for 6 months until we find the next chief people officer, which I did. And so when I kind of told that to my new boss, he said, oh, that's really interesting that you did that. Really happy. in order to manage the two functions, I think that the secret sauce is to just have really great people. So I have an incredible associate general counsel, Maureen Boyle. I have an incredible director of HR, Michelle Hamilton. And I often say like I help with the legal and HR teams because that's all I really do at the end of the day. Michelle and Maureen and the teams that are under them, they do everything. I mean, they're the ones that do all of the real hard work, the work that actually needs to get done. They'll present stuff to me and I'll make decisions on it, and provide strategic direction, so to speak. But the only way I could actually get legal and HR done simultaneously at any company would be because the team itself is strong enough to do the work themselves.
Yeah, that's definitely true. When you're surrounded by the smartest people, the brightest people that you can rely on, I mean, you can definitely manage, I feel like anything. And Ironclad has a small but mighty legal team. Shout out to the legal team. I know they may be watching right now. And we try to make a meaningful impact across the organization. But can you tell me a little bit about what are your thoughts on how legal can really make an impact across a company?
Yeah, I think there's two parts to this answer. I think one is I'm going to steal something that I read in an article again, kind of like harken back to like how important it is to read articles. And I think it was the Wells Fargo general counsel who got asked like, what is your strategy as GC at Wells Fargo? And she said it's 4 words. It's mitigate risk and add value. And I love that because I think that the mitigate risk part, again, as I mentioned, is for GCs is like what we do in our day job. And I kind of view mitigate risk as defense, add value as offense. And the defense part of our job as lawyers is like, identify risk, manage the risk, make sure everything's okay. And I think that part of our jobs has become somewhat, again, to use the term, table stakes. Like I think that's what when we get hired as GCs or as lawyers, the expectation is that we know how to identify problems, we know how to get through them, we can make recommendations. And I think that's become like the expectation of mitigating risk is that part of our job is normal. I think it's this other part that is the add value part or the offense part, which is I think the meaningful impact that I think lawyers kind of now need to like think about. And I'll give you an example, which is really about how to create value in your business and to be viewed as someone who is really like not just taking care of making sure we don't get sued, but it's also like how am I actually making the business money, right? And I think one example that happened at my last company was we were a B2C business, so we had tons of customers, and we had a customer support service, right? And every time that a customer reaches out directly through that support hotline, it creates a ticket, and that ticket costs the company money, like actual dollars. And I think that it's one way lawyers can kind of get involved is give you a practical thing. It's like go through all of those tickets, look at all of those customer service problems, and see if there are any of them that legal can help, right? And so like some of them were privacy related, some of them were terms of service related, where they were just confused, like what does this mean in the terms of service? And it's our job, like I can, as lawyers, we control the terms of service. We should be able to clarify, write them better. On the privacy stuff, like make the flow better, make it easier for people to understand what are they actually, what information is being shared, what's not being shared. And I think when you go through though and say like, I'm going to take an active job, tell my CEO, tell my CFO that I'm going to lower costs somewhere in the business, and because I have a real part to play in it, then you say that to the business, and you're saying, hey, I identify an area where I can save the business money, increase margin. Then they're going to look at you like, oh wow, Stephen, I can't believe you were thinking about that. And you don't just do that in one area of the business, do that every single day in all areas of the business. And that's how I think you add value. You play that offense and you show the rest of the business, hey, like I'm thinking about around every corner of the business and trying to think about, hey, this is where I can drive value and drive like meaningful change and meaningful impact to the entire company.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely agree with that. Oftentimes we're reactionary. We get an email, we react. But it's during those times where legal is a little quiet, where we can think, where we can, innovate, really be a partner to the business instead of just reacting to an issue. And that's really where in-house, counsel can create value for the organization. Definitely resonates.
Totally agree with that.
Let's switch gears. I really want to hear about this big deal. We've been, I don't know, I feel like we've been building up the anticipation, talked about me, talked about you. Walk us through this deal. What happened? How did it come about? Give me the deets.
Absolutely. So the deal Laura was mentioning is we closed a really large transaction when I actually first started at InStride with Amazon. And so our sales cycles, which are very, very different from enterprise SaaS. Enterprise SaaS is probably like a 2 to 6 month, sales cycle. Our sales cycles are much longer, anywhere between like 9 months and 2 years, primarily because these companies are like investing like large amounts of dollars. I'd say like anywhere between $500,000 to $10 million, like long term, and investing in the education opportunities that are going to be available to their employees. And these are large companies too. Their employee bases can be, target customer for us could be, we loved our 5,000 and above, but sometimes in order to scale our product, it really needs to be 50,000 employees and above. And so we'd been talking to Amazon probably a year and a half before I even started InStride. But when I did, we were at the contracting phase, and that's when I got involved to make sure the contract got signed. And we did that probably in the first couple of months. I think to describe like what we're actually doing for Amazon is really important. So the people that we're actually servicing with respect to the Amazon business are not the people in like Seattle HQ, who are all have college degrees and working on that part of the Amazon's business or the AWS business. We're actually talking about the people that deliver the packages to our doors. And a lot of people may not realize that those delivery workers are not Amazon employees. They actually work for small mom and pop companies called delivery service providers, as we call them, DSPs. And again, they have anywhere between 5 employees and 50 employees, and they employ or contract out these specific delivery drivers that end up delivering the packages that we get every day. And so it's these DSPs that are now engaging in our platform. And Amazon has about 3,000 of these DSPs currently, and that number is supposed to grow as I buy more and more toothpaste every single day. But that number is supposed to go from 3,000 to several more thousand. And the idea is to get these delivery workers, again, the opportunity for these people who didn't go to college traditionally right after high school. And that's why I think the mission is really cool, is because these people, for whatever reason, life got in the way, right? They didn't go to college right after school because maybe there was the family issue, or maybe there's a medical issue, or maybe there's a financial issue. For whatever reason, these people, they didn't take the traditional path, and now they're 30, 40, 50 years old, and coming back to the workforce, they've got a stable job with Amazon delivery. They've got a couple kids at home or a couple pets at home. They don't really have time to like go back to school 40 hours a week. And so what the opportunity is for their employer, Amazon in this case, to pay for an online education for these employees so they can do it, after their regular day job. And so it's kind of like that's what online education really allows, is to take the education courses outside of your day job, because that opportunity might not have been available to you if you had to go in person to the university down the street. Now you can do the online education in your free time. And that's what we're really offering these delivery workers, is to come in and get the academic opportunities that might have passed them by earlier in their lives.
Yeah, so I'm trying to do the math here. I hear Amazon, I hear InStride. How does Ironclad fit in? How do you why are we even doing this webinar? What life changing technology did Ironclad provide?
Yeah, really... so I wanted to make sure the audience didn't think I was have an Ironclad 2 under my hoodie right here, which I may or may not. You'll just have to guess whether I do. But so when we closed the Amazon deal, and we kind of knew that there were 3,000 delivery service companies that we kind of had to work with. In a normal transaction, we would just have one contract with the enterprise company, and we'd be done. But in the Amazon deal, it wasn't one contract with Amazon. We were looking down, having potentially 3,000 contracts with 3,000 different DSPs, and it was like, oh my God. And immediately, there's no way I can even think about negotiating 10 contracts in a month. We have to do 3,000 and as quickly as possible. And so immediately, it was a ClickWrap solution or a click-through acceptance solution is what I knew we needed. And we were lucky because we had already been on the process, and we can kind of address this in later Q&A, of a CLM solution. And so we already had a contract management solution, kind of like RFP that was going. I think we had like internal spreadsheets of like 20 different characteristics of what our CLM provider needed. I think we had narrowed it down to 2, Ironclad being one of them. Kind of lands on my desk when I first start. And I'm like, okay, why are we picking between the two? Like what's going on here? And then once we knew about the Clickwrap solution that Ironclad had, then it was kind of like, okay, now it's like, we're definitely using Ironclad. I think one thing for me, which again, whether or not I have the tattoo here or not, is that Ironclad is really well known in the industry for being kind of like the number one. And we had looked at an Ironclad as a CLM provider at obviously my other companies as well. So it wasn't my first time like hearing about it. And Ironclad as a reputation is probably the best out there. So I think when you have a client coming in like Amazon and you're trying to like figuring out the best solution, like I don't want to create a solution that's not like only half as good because I'm trying to save the money. When I have a client like Amazon that's really going to potentially change the landscape of our business, I want to go with the best solution. And I knew Ironclad was, in my opinion, just thinking conservatively as a lawyer, like was the least risk, highest value. Let's just go with Ironclad. They're the best. And Ironclad, we basically the Clickwrap solution ended up becoming like the more important thing. And so we demoed the Clickwrap solution with Ironclad's reps. It was a solution that was more or less perfect. The real interesting part is that our product team didn't even know about Ironclad before I started. And so they were actually planning to build the entire platform to support the click-through acceptance part. And I was like, no, that's not going to work. Like, there are people out there, again, that have done this before. And I think the real big issue was like, I think our team didn't even understand that, like, hey, once all these contracts get like clicked through and like accepted, they've got to get saved down somewhere. And like in a place where lawyers can actually go through it, so that if DSP number 341 is like, hey, what's in my contract? When did I sign it? Like, I have to be able to go back to the file and find DSP number. I don't even know what number I said, 341. And find what that contract says. And like, obviously the CLM, only a storage management solution like Ironclad would be able to do it. And so like, I wasn't going to pick a different CLM provider and a different click-through acceptance. Like Ironclad already had like all built in-house in a way that could easily talk to each other. And so like, it was like very, very simple decision when it came time to like, how do we get these 3,000 DSPs on? Frictionless journey. Let's use Ironclad solution.
Yeah. For folks on the webinar that, hear click to accept, Clickwrap, it's a contract that's legally binding, where you can click, and that is deemed a digital acceptance. They're non-negotiable, and it's a way for businesses like InStride to really get through 3,000 agreements. Yeah, I really want to hear a little bit more about the deployment. How did that happen? What was it like?
Again, like, I don't think I could have done anything without Maureen Boyle. So like, shout out to her. Like, I'm the one talking to you, Laura, but like, as I mentioned earlier, like, I think the teams do all the work. I think that the most important part after we signed the Amazon contract and we needed a Clickwrap solution was creating what I would call like the frictionless journey for our DSPs, and actually rolling it out. Because I think that you have to remember who are these mom and pops that we're talking to. I think as lawyers, we sometimes like forget that the other side, we already get like, mad when the other side doesn't have a lawyer, because we're like, oh, who are we talking to? But now I think in these situations where you're like, you're trying to get someone to like take on an educational benefit, which we know is good for them, which is benefiting them, which, again, Amazon's footing the bill, so why not do it? But at the end of the day, like, we still need a contract in place. And so it's the goal from day one was to get the easiest, most frictionless journey possible for any DSP owner to come onto the website and say, like, what am I getting myself into? What am I agreeing to? And that was number one for sure, both from the legal side at InStride, and from Ironclad's perspective, which I think that's what click-through acceptance is anyway, is you're trying to smooth the journey to get to a signed contract. And so I think that was number one. In terms of like how things are going, I think the deployment has been amazing. We then brought the CLM solution along. We rolled this out for a few months now. It's been live for a while. And everyone that's coming through the DSP portal is signing up, and then it gets saved down to a drive, and my team can go look for any one of those contracts at any time. I think that to share a little bit about how great it's going, I think both Amazon and InStride had a certain target that we were supposed to meet at year one, And because of Ironclad solution, because of all the things that InStride has done on our side to try to, and because the benefit is amazingly cool, we hit that goal, that year one goal, in like 3 months. And now, which by the way impressed everyone, impressed Amazon even, and as hard to please as they might be, given how big they are, they were super happy. And now it's kind of like, okay, what's our next goal after 3 months, because things have been going so well. Again, like I think I told you this, Laura, last week when we were chatting, that I think even though it's been really great to get all the DSPs on, that's kind of like half the journey for us, because remember, signing up the companies is one thing, but we actually need these employees, these delivery workers, to actually sign up, enroll, get into the universities, because that's where the magic is really happening, right? Like a company signing a contract with us is great. We love doing that. But at the end of the day, like we want employees, we want actual people out in the real world to be going to school, right? Like to be getting the education. It doesn't have to be school either. It could be a degree program and you can get your MBA. That's one thing. But it could also be getting your commercial truck driving license. It could be getting a license to learn adult sign language. It could be getting, it could be all of these number of like non-degree programs as well that really just help your career journey. And I think especially, I'm getting a little passionate here talking about my own like mission here.
Of course.
But it's about like, upskilling the entire workforce, and where degrees aren't necessarily the normal anymore, right? Like you should be able to go out into the workforce and get a non-degree certificate or a non-degree skill and be able to use that and get a job. Like why is the mandatory minimum a bachelor's degree in order to get a job? It shouldn't be. Like I don't know if my bachelor's degree necessarily helped me do my job necessarily any better, or out there, for others. It's all about like skills. And certificate and on-the-job training, and that's a lot of what these programs are. It's not just about bachelor's, master's. It's about all this other stuff that you can get to really change your life, because it's moving your career in a totally different direction.
Yeah, I mean, I've said this to you a couple times, but what you're doing is just inspiring. It really is. People have so many barriers, and if just clicking through an agreement opens doors, I know I didn't have any part in Clickwrap or anything, but it makes me proud to be part of a company that really opens doors and allows other people to connect via contracts. I think people look at contracts as that thing that I have to read, or not for me. I love it. It's my job. It's my passion. If you're listening, Chris. It's one of those things that people look at it and they're like, oh, terms of service. What is this? Do I have to click through this? But we really need to understand the process and understand what we're getting. And in this case, you're getting so many benefits. You're getting the opportunity to pick and choose what you want to learn. And, that can open more doors for you to be able to support your family in a different manner if you want to.
I totally agree.
It's amazing.
I think the goal for us was to get as many DSPs or as many companies through the door and signed up so that we can get their employees to become learners. Like, even though that's our business model, like I think everyone in the world agrees, like that's what we want to happen, right? And I think Ironclad and their click-through acceptance allowed us to have that journey be like smoother, easier, better for everyone involved. And like if we didn't, and we had to like negotiate one-on-one with every single DSP, it would have like slowed down the process of all of these people getting the benefit that we want them to get.
Yeah. So what are the numbers? I feel like what you've said, like you've onboarded a lot of DSPs, but I want to hear numbers. What facts, please?
So I don't know if I'm even allowed to talk about it. Try not to get fired.
Wait, yeah. No, please don't.
So yeah, I think we were
estimates then.
Our goal is well over 1,000 first year, and we knocked it out of the park again on the timeline that I mentioned. I don't want to mention what our goals and Amazon's goals are for the future, but I think I have no doubt they got extremely more ambitious the moment we realized how well we were doing. Because I think, again, it comes back to the mission. I think Amazon really believes in this. They're footing the bill in the millions of dollars figure. And in terms of like standing behind, making sure this program happens. And again, I think the one thing, if there's any HR people on the line, that I think InStride offers is the stickiness. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out, how do I create retention for the existing employees that I have? And like offering this like 401k again, which I analogize to is a benefit. I don't know if it necessarily keeps employees there all the time, because I think most people have the expectation that 401k will probably exist at my next employer, but not everyone offers an educational benefit. And I think that creates a super sticky situation, because once you enroll in a program, and if it's a year or 2 years, I think you recognize not only like, wow, my company is investing in me. Like I kind of like, it gives you like an immediate positive smile when you think about like InStride, or you think about the company like, or Ironclad. Even if Ironclad wanted to do it, you immediately think like, Ironclad is paying for my education. They're willing to invest in me. Like, why would I go across the street to work for someone else when I could work at a company that's continuing to further my career? So yeah.
Yeah. So we're about getting to the last portion, but I just wanted to some more, Stephen, pearls of wisdom. What's your best advice? What do you want to tell people on this webinar?
Yeah, I think one thing, I think the last sprinkle of advice that I think I'll give is to really build relationships. I think at the end of the day, both inside and outside your company, I think when you think about the internal aspect of your job and why building relationships matter, I think that again, it's table stakes to be a good lawyer, to do a good job, to be really great at identifying issues and come up with solutions. Again, I think that's table stakes. I think that I often describe communication or relationship building with three phases. I used to have this high school teacher who I really like, actually, even though I'm gonna criticize this one statement that he makes, is like, we'd have a big test or a big exam coming up, and he'd say like, hey, it's not a test, it's an opportunity for you to show me how smart you are or how much you learned, right? And I think that it really is an opportunity for me to communicate with the teacher to show him or her how much I learned. And I think that as lawyers, anytime you're in-house, you have three phases of communication that you have. And really, I view them as three opportunities to shine, to show who you are. One is email, one is at the telephone, and one is meetings, which are on Zoom or in person. And those are your three phases of communication. And I think you need to like excel at all three of them, because each one of them is an opportunity to show, what are you like as a lawyer? How are you thinking? How are you approaching this problem? Do you like to write 100 sentences, or do you like to write 2 sentences, right? Like those are all aspects of like your personality and your communication style, your work style. And those how you build that persona and the relationships that you have with your CFO, your COO, all of the other, executives, your VPs, everyone matters, because when it comes time to getting things done, your relationship to that person will matter, because if they don't like your style, they don't like your approach, they don't like whatever, or you just don't know them because you've never met them, like it's gonna be harder to get things done. And if you invest the time to go learn about other people, to build those relationships, then you'll succeed way more. I think there's one last like little story that I'd give, which is my last CEO often told me, I never go into a board meeting where I don't already know the answer, right? And so like that should, like, I take that advice a lot. So what he would do, by the way, to explain what he means by that, is he would literally call or text every single board member about what was going to get discussed at the meeting, so that he knew which way they were going towards a certain decision. And like I take that advice like almost to every meeting that I do now, which is, before I go into a meeting where I'm like, hey, can I get legal support to hire an Ironclad? Like Ironclad's going to cost X amount of dollars. Can I do it or not? And I have to go get 3 other buy-ins. I'm going to go call or stop by those 3 other people's offices and make sure like, hey, they know how important it is to me. So when it comes time, like, hey, are we voting on Ironclad? Are we doing it or not? All those 3 people already know which way they're going to go. And it's like, if I didn't build that relationship with them or care to build that relationship with them, like, again, I wouldn't know what the answer is, because they might say no, right? Like they don't know how important it is to me unless I told them. So you have to take the time to build those relationships. That's how I think you're really successful as a GC.
No, that's advice that if I wasn't taking this, talking to you, I would be writing this down. And I think everyone should be, but I'm trying to focus on what you're saying. So we got a couple of questions, and we're going to dive into some questions from the chat and some pre-submitted questions. We got one. It's a weird one, but I think we already answered it. It's, why are you so awesome, Stephen? I think we covered that.
I saw that question come in. It is totally false. Like I think it's like, yeah, it's definitely not true. But I appreciate that person that asked, and I know who that person is, and I love that person. So thanks for asking it.
Now let's shift some direction. And how do you balance adding value versus protecting your team's bandwidth and prioritizing important things?
This is such a great question. I think it comes up frequently, and probably have to balance it all the time. I think the answer is to actually like figure out what your priorities and strategies are first, and then figuring out what people are working on. So I have one-on-ones. My legal team at InStride is relatively small, so it's me, a lawyer, and a legal director. She's more than a paralegal, so she's not just a paralegal to us. And figuring out like what are we working on, how much time is it taking, and then we kind of like marry it up with our strategic priorities and figure out like, okay, what are we able to accomplish while working, the number of hours that we do. So, a secret, again, I don't want to get fired here, but like I have a secret when I manage my team, which is we should only be working like 40 hours a week and no more than that. And I think there's always like the times where like we have to like stretch a little bit, but I'm a big believer in work life, whatever the latest term is. I was going to say balance, but I don't know if people believe in that anymore. But it's very much like, you're here to work, your life is not work. And so like I call it the circle. So the circle is how much time you have in the day to do the work that you need to do. And so like I'm in constant communication with the team, and they know, hey, I'm not trying to like break you. Like I don't care if you work 100 hours a week. Like I actually don't want you to. I want you to do the 40 that we talked about. And how you get that 40 done, like it should feel like 40. And then we try to figure out like, okay, how do we? That's their day job. And I'm constantly thinking about getting more efficient. By the way, like that's probably like the secret sauce to what I would say is that the answer to like doing more is to either do something that you already do more efficiently or to not do the other thing that you're doing. So like, I think sometimes where you're just like, I'll take an example, and this is like maybe a terrible example to use as an in-house lawyer, but like NDAs are one thing where it's like, you could really go to town on an NDA if you really wanted to. You could spend like 4 hours on the NDA, send it to the other side, spend 2 hours negotiating with it, whatever. Like I look at an NDA, I'm like, okay, that's going to take 20 seconds at most to make sure there's not something bad in there. And it's like, all right, let's get ready to sign this thing, right? And that alone just saved, I don't know if I'm exaggerating or not when I said 4 to 6 hours in negotiating the NDA, but like you could take that 4 to 6 hours, or you could just spend 20 seconds, like I just said, or 0. And so I think it's all about like prioritizing what you think is like of importance. Again, I don't, as GC, like unless you're GC and you go through like the life cycle, like I've been in the legal department long enough to know that NDAs don't come bite me that often, or especially if I get one wrong. And so like that's how I prioritize. And like again, it's about being more efficient or spending less or just not doing something. That's how you like build more time in your circle to kind of focus on those other things, which a lot, like I think you said it, Laura, which is like when you're not like bogged down with the work, how can you take a step back and start strategizing for the adding value part? And that's how you do it. But like again, becoming really efficient on on your day job, so you can like take time to like add to your circle and do a little bit more for the rest of the business.
Yeah, for sure. I think we have one more time for one more question, and I'm going to try and get maybe a quick one here, which is how long was the implementation process for the Clickwrap?
Yeah, so that's again probably a question for Maureen, but like from my vantage point, I think it was really fast. Like I think once we did the demo with Ironclad and said and got the product teams talking to each other, which by the way I think is super important, because I think click-through acceptance doesn't always necessarily live in isolation. It probably can, but I think you're probably going to marry it up with something that your company's doing from a platform or portal perspective. So like I'm a lawyer, I don't know anything about technology, or like how to build something from a product perspective. And so like it was really important to get out of the way. I mean, you definitely have to like continue to make sure that they're building it in the right direction. But like once the product teams start talking to it, like they're the ones that can actually do the thing. And so I think that process probably only took 2 or 3 months, and then we were up and running. And then the CLM solution kind of came like right after it. It was pretty easy. At least we implemented it for Amazon. We didn't implement the full CLM solution. We're probably actually still doing that today, just to make sure that the CLM part is right. But we launched the CLM so that it could support the click-through acceptance. I think it only took about 3 months.
Yeah, well, thank you, Stephen, for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for joining. If you're interested in learning about Ironclad Clickwrap, please check out the link in the chat and feel free to get to know our team and get more info. The only other thing I will add is don't miss our next virtual event. They're fun. And at the next one, you'll learn a little bit more about Ironclad AI. So link in the chat. And thanks, everyone. I had a blast, Stephen. Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Me too. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much, Laura.